Good morning, everyone. We're here today with another interesting topic about history.
That's right. What will we be talking about today?
Well, today's topic will be about World War II, specifically its effects.
Yes, today we'll analyze how the impacts of this war has affected U.S. society today.
I believe this global conflict has had both negative and positive effects, which have affected the U.S. population.
I couldn't agree more.
Me too. We should start off by stating the major effects right after World War II ended. Yes, this way we can analyze them in order to see how it affects the U.S. society as a whole. As we may all know, Germany was defeated. Nevertheless, also England was devastated by the war, having experienced extensive bombing during the 1940 Blitz by the Germans.
Evidently, the economy depended for recovery upon aid from the United States. England rapidly phased out most of its remaining imperial holdings in the years immediately following the war.
We can also agree on the fact that England and France no longer held the status of power comparable either to the United States or the Soviet Union.
Yes, in addition, the Russian people had suffered immeasurably during the war, and Western Russia was devastated by the land warfare, which was primarily on Russian territory. But in the process of defeating the Germans, the Russians had built a large and powerful army which occupied most of Eastern Europe at the end of the war. The great resources and population of Russia assured that the Soviet Union would be, along with the United States, one of two powers. Since we're focusing on the United States, it is important to add that the United States economy was greatly stimulated by the war, even more so than in World War I.
Of course, the Depression was brought decisively to an end and new industrial complexes were built all over the United States. Spared the physical destruction of war, the U.S. economy dominated the world economy.
After 4 years of military buildup, the U.S. had also become the leading military power. The position of the United States as world leader was now more obvious than ever.
That's true, but how did the effects of the war affect U.S. society today?
Yes, this is the main focus of this podcast.
Well, it was previously mentioned that new industrial complexes were built all over the United States. If I'm not mistaken, it was you, Saudi?
Yes, I also mentioned that the economy dominated the world economy too.
Yeah. Don't you guys think that the importance, or better yet, the domination of the United States has somewhat increased because of World War II? I don't know if you guys get me. I totally understand your point, and I most definitely agree with you, Carolina. Many of the other countries that have been economically powerful were devastated by the war. This meant that the U.S. was really the only major economic power whose land and infrastructure was untouched by the war.
Well, going back to the new industrial complexes built, I believe this also had a major impact on the society today, don't you guys think?
Of course!
A number of new technologies were invented or advanced. For example, the creation of long-range bombers really helped towards the creation of larger and longer-range passenger airplanes.
Yes, and also the invention of radar helped make it safer for these airplanes to fly from place to place. And, doesn't everyone use radars now? Yes, radars are used in all airports now to provide safety, as you said.
You guys, what about the importance of women? Hasn't that affected the U.S. society today?
You're right, Katerina. Women became employed on a large scale in industries other than traditionally female-dominated areas.
Yes, and with so many men enlisted in the war effort overseas, it fell to the women who were left behind to man in factories and industries. High employment leads to prosperity. This has most definitely helped women today.
So employment, women, economy, these are all positive effects if you think about it.
Yeah. This talk has been nice, but what about the negative effects that affect us today?
Yes, we should pay attention to these too.
The most obvious negative impact was that thousands of Americans' families suffered the loss of family member during the war. There is, of course, no way to measure the impact of these losses on families, but a sense of loss still prevails in the U.S. Also, in some places, racism dwindled because men had to fight with other units of a different race. The units were segregated, but you could still be in a battle with a unit made up of a different race.
That's so true. Great fact, Laura.
Talking about changes in the U.S., were there any geographical changes?
In contrast to some countries in Europe like Germany and Poland, the U.S. had no geographical changes because of the war.
I don't know about you guys, but for me, World War II was such a terrifying war.
Yes, Aori, I think we can all agree that it was horrible.
Yeah. Yes.
Since most people agree that World War II was horrifying, there should be specific things or conflicts that have been prevented due to this view.
Of course, World War II had seemed to represent an unusual danger to human development and offered driving force to reach the vision of a global association to keep the peace. Organizing efforts began even while the war was on. In June 1945, 51 countries were spoken to at the gathering in San Francisco.
Yes, also, in October of this same year, the United Nations was formally settled. Not all like the League of Nations, the UN had the full support and leadership of the United States. The Soviet Union and all of the hugest countries of the world were individuals.
A year before this, in 1944, agents of the major financial forces met to make an international monetary fund and to agree upon an administration of worldwide duty regulation, known as GATT. There was a determination to keep away from the missteps of the interwar years, which had aggravated the Great Depression.
Wow.
I know.
Guys, wait! We're forgetting something crucial. War is most definitely expensive, and countries are left in debt when it ends. Do you think there are countries still paying their debts?
Well, some managed to pay it off after a few years, like Finland, who paid their bill in full after sending $300 million to the Soviet Union in 1952. Still, did you know the UK only finished paying their debts from World War I in March of this year?
Unbelievable!
I also learned that the only Allied countries who won but paid compensation was the USA to Japan in 1988 under the Civil Liberties Act. U.S. President Ronald Reagan apologized to the Japanese Americans interned in camps during World War II and agreed to pay $20,000 to each surviving former detainee.
I didn't know that, but it's great. It was only fair.
I agree, Carolina. But what about Germany, one of the main characters in the war? I heard that after the failure of the Treaty of Versailles, the Allies were much more lenient with them.
Although that's true and pre-war debts were reduced, it is estimated that they asked for more than $320 billion in reparations. Nevertheless, they soon realized Germany could not pay that in its recovering state. It is unclear how much they later agreed upon since it has been renegotiated countless times during the years. It has, however, been revealed that Germany was to relinquish its power and divide itself initially into 4 Allied-owned zones, which were demilitarized and removed of their weaponry.
Additionally, some countries agreed to be paid in industrial and capital equipment, so it really remains as a mystery.
That reminds me, did you know that back in March, Greece asked for a payment to Germany of unresolved debts concerning damage sown by Nazi troops? Back in 2009, a similar situation happened where Israel asked Germany to pay between 450 million to 1 billion euros in reparations for Jews forced into slave labor during the Holocaust, despite the fact that Germany had paid off their allocated debt to Israel.
That's absolutely awful. I don't want to think about other losing countries such as Japan.
Well, things get a little complicated with Japan and war reparations. After World War II, it was estimated that by the Allies that Japan had lost 42% of its national wealth. Therefore, in 1951, Japan signed a treaty to which would work for both sides. Well, things get a little complicated with Japan and war reparations. After World War II, it was estimated that by the Allies that Japan had lost 42% of its national wealth. Therefore, in 1951, Japan signed a treaty to which would work for both sides. In total, Japan's government agreed to make a payment of $6.67 million to the International Red Cross as compensation to former prisoners of war. As for other countries, many were paid in form of investments, help, products, and other things, so it also remains unknown if they have fully paid their debt.
Although other countries like Italy, Romania, and Hungary were supposed to pay for war reparations, the only one who has been known to pay fully is Finland, while others might still be paying, have stopped paying it, or perhaps paid it in agriculture manufactured goods like Carolina said.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? All the new technological advances that surged from World War II.
World War II was definitely a technological war compared to previous wars where so many advances hadn't been made.
Yes, it's true. World War II science and technology not only affected how that war was fought and won, but continues to influence our technology, politics, economics, and even education today.
One of them is the Operations Research, or OR, which is the mathematical study of problems of organization, logistics, and deployment. OR helped the Allies hunt German U-boats in the Atlantic and organize complex logistical needs, like the organization of D-Day. These methods, using statistics and probability, became the underlying principle of today's business, from airline scheduling to delivery goods from around the globe to your local Walmart.
That's interesting. I know another one. Throughout history, more people died in wars from diseases than from weapons. The use of penicillin began to change that during World War II, as using it on large scale helped protect soldiers from bacterial infections. The success of penicillin led to the search for and discovery of the antibiotics we use today. Because of World War II, today an ear infection almost never turns into a life-threatening illness.
That reminds me of the use of the pesticide DDT, which was very effective in controlling the spread of tropical diseases during the war. Sometimes entire cities were dusted from the air. DDT has massive environmental impact. It is highly toxic to many animals and somewhat toxic to humans. Public reactions against heavy DDT use in the U.S. in the 1960s helped ignite the modern environmental movement.
On a much more serious note, the only atomic weapons ever used in an actual war were dropped by the U.S. on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945. The result of a massive scientific and industrial effort, these weapons changed the nature of warfare and international relations up to the present day. For the remainders of the 20th century, the Cold War was characterized by a nuclear standoff between the U.S. and Soviet Union. Today, the threat of terrorist or rogue states acquiring and using nuclear weapons has become a new global reality.
Wow! I can only remember reading something about great advances in training methods, including the use of animated films, technical manuals, and even simulators to recreate combat conditions in the laboratory setting to aid in training. Supposedly, today's interactive whiteboards and video games are their descendants.
Oh yeah, and aided by wartime innovations in radar, electronics, and mathematics, by late in the war scientists and engineers began building electronic digital computers primarily for ballistics and code-breaking applications. While originally built to solve military and scientific calculations, no invention has had more effect on our daily lives in the past 60 years than the electronic digital computer.
Did any of you know we can thank World War II for space tech advancements?
No way!
Yes. During World War II, the Germans developed liquid-fueled rocket weapons that were used to attack civilians in London and throughout southeast England. American engineers developed smaller but tactically more effective solid-fuel rockets. These technologies, along with German, American, and Russian engineers, made the period after World War II into the space age that continues to this day. The rockets that flew to the moon were in some ways an updated version of the German V-2 rocket bomb.
The cell phone in your pocket right now can also thank World War II, since the electronic components, batteries, and new materials like plastics that went from making handy talkies and other radios allowed soldiers to communicate across the Pacific Atoll or across an ocean. Never before were the headquarters and the front lines so well connected. So your cell phone can look to these devices as important ancestors.
Keep in mind that jets must also thank the war. Like much technology of World War II, the jet aircraft was invented before the war, but only became practical during the war. The first jet aircraft to fly was the Heinkel He-178, which took to the air in 1939. Through the first operation fighter was the Messerschmitt Me-262, which entered service in 1944. After World War II, the jet age truly began, and within 15 years, civilian jet airlines based on military transport designs were regularly crossing the Atlantic.
I never knew any of this. We've been so influenced by World War II and everything.
Now you know.
Technology definitely increased, but you know what decreased? Child labor.
You guys, child labor, such an important point. Thanks for bringing it up, Katerina.
Haha, no problem.
Child labor during World War II definitely increased, causing a decline in school attendance.
Well, with the absence of men fighting in the army, kids had to replace them in factories.
Not only replace them, but these kids had to make money. A family's income decreased immensely with the main benefactor missing.
Even though women started working in men's jobs, there wasn't enough money to pay for basic needs and education.
The irony of it all is that many children in the labor force were earning more than teachers.
It's funny the way priorities change in a time of desperation and difficulty.
Well, the first decade after World War II was focused on re-establishing order in society and getting things back to normal, one could say.
The laws passed during and after World War II did try and control the augmentation of child labor, but in the time of necessity, these rules were not followed.
Children had to fill in. If they wouldn't have, the country would have fallen apart.
That's true. Youngsters played a huge part in the maintaining the country economically and socially.
On the other hand, after World War II, child labor decreased. Adults needed the jobs children had, and the production levels of supplies of the war decreased.
Wow, World War II definitely has influenced U.S. society today.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, that's all the time we have for you today, folks.
Yes, be sure to follow us on social media and share this interesting podcast about World War II.
Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LCS Productions.
See you next time. Woohoo!